Our new neighbors were everything you could ever want, the picture of suburban perfection. But it took my 7-year-old daughter's crayon drawing to reveal the true horror they were burying right next door. The first 6 months with the Johnsons as our next-door neighbors were idyllic. A little slice of suburban heaven, the kind you see in commercials for lawnmowers or life insurance. I'm a single dad, and my 7-year-old daughter, Lily, is my entire world. So when Tom and Carol Johnson moved in with their daughter, Chloe, who was exactly Lily's age, it felt like we'd won the lottery. Tom was the kind of guy who'd show up with a six-pack and help you assemble an IKEA bookshelf you'd been cursing at for 3 hours. Carol baked apple pies that could probably broker world peace, and she'd always bring a slice over, still warm from the oven. Their lawn was immaculate, their Christmas lights were the envy of the block, and they always had a friendly wave for you. They were, in a word, perfect. Lily and Chloe became inseparable overnight. Their giggles were the constant soundtrack to my summer, a melody of scraped knees, whispered secrets, and shared ice pops. They had their own little world, a kingdom that spanned our 2 backyards, connected by a small, perpetually open gate in the fence. I'd watch them from the kitchen window, 2 little girls with wildly different hair. Lily's a cascade of unruly brown curls, Chloe's a sleek blonde ponytail, but with the exact same brand of infectious joy. For the first time since my wife passed, I felt a profound sense of community, of belonging. We weren't just 2 people in a house anymore. We were part of something bigger. Lily has always been an artist. Her emotions, her experiences, her entire understanding of the world spills out onto paper in a vibrant chaos of crayons and markers. Our refrigerator isn't just a refrigerator, it's a gallery, a rotating exhibit of her life. There are pictures of me as a superhero with a lopsided cape, pictures of her hamster, Squeaky, driving a rocket ship, and dozens of pictures of her and Chloe playing. They were always the same. 2 smiling stick figures with mismatched dresses, holding hands under a giant smiling sun. That's why the drawing she brought to me one Tuesday evening felt so different. I was stirring a pot of spaghetti sauce, the smell of garlic and oregano filling the kitchen. Lily was at the little table in the corner, unusually silent. The only sound was the frantic scratching of her brown crayon against the paper. It was a harsh, aggressive sound, not her usual light, feathery strokes. "Everything okay, Sweet Pea?" I asked, turning the heat down. She didn't look up. "I'm drawing a secret," she mumbled, her brow furrowed in concentration. "A secret, huh? Is it a good one?" She just shrugged, her little shoulders tensing. A few minutes later, she padded over to me, holding the piece of paper out with both hands. "I'm finished, Daddy." I wiped my hands on a dish towel and took the drawing from her. "Let's see what my little Picasso has created." My voice trailed off as I looked at it. The usual smiling sun was there, but it was crammed into a tiny corner, almost as an afterthought. The main focus was the Johnsons' house next door. It was drawn with heavy, dark lines. In front of the house stood 4 figures. I could recognize Lily's art style anywhere. 2 of them were clearly Mr. and Mrs. Johnson. They had the same fixed, wide smiles they always wore, but they weren't waving. Next to them, I recognized Lily and Chloe, holding hands as usual, but they weren't smiling. Their faces were just blank circles, their mouths straight, worried lines, and they were looking at another family, a family I had never seen before. A man, a woman, and a little boy, all drawn with the same brown crayon Lily used for her own hair. They were standing on the sidewalk, and unlike the other figures, they had tears big, blue, cartoonish teardrops falling from their eyes. The most disturbing part, however, was what was happening in the Johnsons' perfectly manicured yard. Tom and Carol were each holding a watering can, but they weren't watering their prize-winning roses. The cans were aimed at a small patch of flowers on the strip of grass by the sidewalk, the public part of the lawn. And the flowers in that patch were all colored black, scribbled over with angry, violent strokes. They were dead, wilted things. All the other flowers in the yard were bright yellows and reds. My stomach twisted. It was just a child's drawing, but it felt wrong. The scene it depicted was ugly, unsettling. "Honey," I said, trying to keep my voice light. This is very detailed. Who are these people? I pointed to the crying family. Lily looked down at her feet. Chloe told me not to tell. You can tell me, sweet pea. We don't keep secrets from each other, remember? She looked up at me, her big brown eyes filled with a confusion that mirrored my own. She pointed a small finger at the brown stick figures. That's the family that wanted to be our new neighbors. Before the Johnsons came. A chill went down my spine. A family had put in an offer on that house before the Johnsons. I remember the "for sale" sign being up for weeks. Then suddenly a "sold" sign appeared, which was then replaced by the "for sale" sign again a week later. I'd thought it was strange that maybe their financing fell through. I knelt down to her level, my heart starting to pound. I pointed at the drawing, at the watering cans in Tom and Carol's hands. And what are Mr. and Mrs. Johnson doing here, Lily? What are they pouring on the flowers? Lily looked at the drawing, then back at me, her expression one of pure, unadulterated innocence. It was the innocence of her answer that shattered my world into a million pieces. Oh, she said, her voice a small matter-of-fact whisper. That's the special garden poison. Chloe said her daddy made it to get rid of the weeds before they could take root. Weeds. The word hung in the air, thick and suffocating, instantly tainting the smell of the garlic and tomatoes. A single, simple word, spoken with the guileless innocence of a 7-year-old, had just ripped a hole through the fabric of my quiet, comfortable world. My hand, still holding the wooden spoon, trembled slightly. I looked from the grotesque drawing to my daughter's face. She was just repeating a story she'd heard, using words she didn't understand. But I understood. Oh God, I understood perfectly. The brown-skinned family. The black, dead flowers. The weeds. Okay, sweet pea, I managed, my voice strained. Why don't you go wash up for dinner? Spaghetti's almost ready. She smiled, the gravity of the moment completely lost on her, and skipped off toward the bathroom. I sank into a kitchen chair, the drawing flat on the table in front of me. I stared at it, my spaghetti forgotten. The smiling stick-figure faces of Tom and Carol now looked like demonic masks, their perfect lawn a sterile hunting ground. The friendly waves, the warm apple pies, the offers to help with yard work. Was it all a performance? A carefully constructed facade to hide the rot underneath? My mind raced back through the last 6 months. Every interaction, every neighborly gesture was now suspect. I remembered a conversation with Tom over the fence just a few weeks ago. I'd been complaining about some dandelions. Gotta be vigilant, man, he'd said with a cheerful laugh, holding up a bottle of weed killer. You let one of these guys take root, and before you know it, they've taken over the whole yard. Devalues the whole neighborhood. He'd clapped me on the shoulder. At the time, I just nodded in agreement. Now, his words echoed in my head with a sinister new meaning. Dinner was a quiet affair. I moved on autopilot, serving Lily, twirling pasta onto her fork, but my mind was elsewhere. I couldn't look out the window towards the Johnsons' house without a knot of ice forming in my gut. After I tucked Lily into bed, reading her a story about a brave knight and a friendly dragon, I went back to the kitchen. The drawing was still there. It felt like an indictment. I couldn't just march over there and confront them based on this. They would deny it. They would call me crazy. They would paint me as the unstable single father making wild accusations, and given their standing in the neighborhood, people would probably believe them. They would isolate me. Worse, they would isolate Lily. They would cut her off from her best friend, and I would be the one who had destroyed her little world. No, I had to be smart. I had to be sure. The next morning, I saw Carol walking back from her mailbox. She gave me her signature 1,000-watt smile and a wave. Morning. Beautiful day, isn't it? Sure is, I called back, my own smile feeling like a cheap mask. My heart was hammering against my ribs. I was looking at a monster who baked pies. I needed proof, something more concrete than a child's interpretation of a hateful secret. The drawing. Lily had been so specific. The poison, the watering cans, the patch of flowers by the sidewalk. That was a tangible place, a potential crime scene. I waited until well after midnight. The entire street was dark and silent. save for the rhythmic hum of cicadas and the orange glow of the streetlights. Every house was a silhouette, every window a dark, unblinking eye. I pulled on a dark hoodie, my hands clammy, and slipped out my back door, creeping along the side of my house. I felt like a burglar, my every step seeming to crunch too loudly on the grass. The spot from Lily's drawing was easy to find. It was the public strip of grass between the sidewalk and the street, directly in front of the Johnsons' property line. From a distance it looked fine, but as I got closer, kneeling down so my face was just inches from the ground, the street lamp cast long, eerie shadows. I saw it. It wasn't a huge, obvious dead patch. It was subtle. The soil was a slightly darker color, almost greasy looking, and while there was grass it was thin and brittle, with a sickly yellow-brown tinge. I ran my fingers through it, and the blades crumbled to dust. There were no dandelions, no clover, nothing. It was a sterile dead zone about the size of a doormat. Poisoned, just like Lily's drawing showed. A wave of nausea rolled over me. It was real. This wasn't a misunderstanding. This happened. My blood ran cold. I was kneeling on the evidence of a hateful act. An act so vile they had managed to drive a family away before they even moved in. How? What did they do? What did they say? My mind was a whirlwind of ugly possibilities. Then a flicker of movement caught my eye. I froze, my heart leaping into my throat. A light had turned on in an upstairs window of the Johnsons' house. Chloe's room. Her bedroom window faced the front of the house, directly overlooking the spot where I was kneeling. My body went rigid. I was caught. I was a man in a dark hoodie, trespassing, snooping on their lawn in the middle of the night. My mind scrambled for an excuse. I was looking for my keys, chasing a raccoon. Anything. But I didn't get the chance to run. A small figure appeared in the window. It was Chloe. She wasn't hiding or running to get her parents. She just stood there, a small silhouette against the soft light of her unicorn nightlight. She was staring right at me. For a long, terrifying moment we just looked at each other across the dark expanse of the lawn. Then, very slowly, she raised a small hand. I thought she was going to wave, or point, or something, but instead, she pressed her palm flat against the cool glass of the window pane. Her warm breath created a small circle of fog on the glass, and with one deliberate finger, she drew a picture in the condensation. It was a flower, with drooping petals and a bent stem, a dead flower. Then she drew a single straight line right through the middle of it. She held my gaze for one more second, her expression unreadable, before dropping her hand and stepping back from the window, disappearing into the darkness of her room. The image of the dead flower seared itself onto the back of my eyelids. It wasn't a warning. It felt like a confirmation. A silent, desperate message sent across a lawn that had become a battlefield. I scrambled to my feet, my legs feeling like jelly, and bolted back to the safety of my own house, my heart thundering a frantic rhythm against my ribs. I locked the door behind me and leaned against it, gasping for breath as if I'd just run a marathon. Chloe had seen me. She knew why I was there, and she had shown me that she knew what her parents had done. This wasn't just Lily's second-hand story anymore. This was a shared secret, a burden being carried by two 7-year-old girls who shouldn't have to know such ugliness existed. My anger, which had been a low simmer, began to boil. What kind of people poison their own children's minds with this kind of hatred? What kind of parents turn their daughter into a silent accomplice? Sleep was impossible. I spent the rest of the night pacing my living room, the two drawings, one on paper, one in my mind playing on a loop. I had to do something. But what? Going to the police with a story about a child's drawing and a patch of dead grass felt insane. They'd think I was a crank. I needed something more. I needed a name. The next morning I called my realtor, a friendly woman named Sarah who had sold me my house 3 years ago. I tried to sound casual, making small talk about the weather and the market before getting to the point. "Hey Sarah, quick question for you. A bit random," I began, trying to keep the tremor out of my voice. "I was just thinking about when the house next door was for sale, before the Johnsons bought it." I seem to remember a sold sign going up and then coming down again pretty quickly. Do you happen to remember who the original buyers were? Just curious. There was a pause on the other end of the line. That's an odd question, Mark, she said, her tone shifting from friendly to cautious. Why do you ask? No reason, really. Just making conversation with another neighbor, and it came up. We couldn't remember the name, and it's just one of those things that's going to bother me all day, I lied, hoping it sounded convincing. Well, I'm not really supposed to give out client information, she started, and my heart sank. But, she continued, lowering her voice slightly, that whole situation was unusual. The buyers were the Davidsons, a lovely family. 2 doctors, a little boy. They were so excited. Then, out of the blue, they pulled their offer. Said there was a hostile environment in the neighborhood, and they didn't feel it was a safe place to raise their son. They lost their earnest money and everything. It was a real shame. Caused quite a stir. The Davidsons, a family of doctors, a little boy. The Brown Crayon family. It all clicked into place. A hostile environment, I repeated, my knuckles white as I gripped the phone. What did they mean by that? They were pretty tight-lipped about the specifics, Sarah said. Just mentioned some unsettling interactions with a few of the neighbors. Honestly, Mark, it sounded like a classic case of, well, you know, they were a black family, and this neighborhood, for all its good qualities, is not exactly a melting pot. A cold fury washed over me. It was real. They had been harassed, intimidated, and driven away from their dream home by the smiling, pie-baking monsters next door, and no one had done a damn thing. Finding them was easier than I expected. A quick search for doctors named Davidson in the city led me to a hospital website, Dr. Marcus and Dr. Elara Davidson. Their staff photos showed the same kind faces Lily had tried to capture in her drawing. Finding their home address took a bit more digging, but an hour later I had it. They had bought a house in a newer development on the other side of town. I knew it was a long shot. I knew I would sound like a lunatic. But I had to try. I drove over there that afternoon, my stomach churning with a mixture of nerves and righteous anger. I parked down the street from their house, a beautiful 2-story brick home with a meticulously landscaped yard, and just sat there for a few minutes rehearsing what I would say. Finally, I took a deep breath and walked up the stone pathway to their front door. Before I could even ring the bell, the door opened. A man, Dr. Marcus Davidson, stood there. He was tall, dressed in scrubs, and had a weary but kind expression. He was holding a set of car keys. "Can I help you?" he asked, his eyes assessing me with a calm, professional curiosity. I suddenly felt like an intruder. "Dr. Davidson, my name is Mark. I live next door to the house you were going to buy on Elm Street." His entire demeanor changed. The friendly curiosity vanished, replaced by a guarded, weary tension. His shoulders stiffened. "Okay," he said, his voice flat. "What do you want?" "I know this is going to sound crazy," I stammered, holding up Lily's drawing, which I'd brought with me. "But my daughter, she's friends with the little girl who lives there now, and she drew this picture. She told me a story about what happened, about the weeds, about the poison." He stared at the drawing, his eyes widening almost imperceptibly. He looked from the crayon figures to my face, a flicker of something disbelief, recognition, in his gaze. "My wife found a note in our mailbox," he said, his voice low and tight with barely suppressed anger. "It was just one sentence. 'We don't want your kind here. We have a special way of getting rid of weeds.' The next morning the welcome mat our realtor had left for us had been defaced, sprayed with something that killed the grass underneath it. We saw the man who lives there now, Tom Johnson, out watering his lawn later that day, just staring at us, smiling. My son was terrified. We pulled the offer that afternoon. We couldn't raise our child in a place like that. My blood ran cold. The note, the smiling. It was so much worse than I had imagined. "I believe you," I said, my voice thick with emotion. "I am so sorry that happened to you. To your family." He just nodded, his jaw tight. He looked exhausted, like a man who had fought a battle and was still carrying the scars. "Why are you here, Mark?" he asked again, his voice softer this time. "What do you expect me to do?" "I don't know," I admitted honestly. "But I can't just let them get away with it. They're teaching their daughter the same poison they put on your lawn. I have to do something. I just need more. More than a drawing and a dead patch of grass. Something undeniable. Dr. Davidson looked past me, his gaze distant, as if reliving that horrible week. For a moment, I thought he was going to tell me to leave, to just let it go. But then his eyes refocused on me, a new, hard glint in them. My wife, he said slowly, is meticulous. She documents everything. When the harassment started, she set up a small security camera, the kind people use as a nanny cam. She pointed it out the front window of the empty house just in case. She took it with her when we cleared our things out. She never told me if it captured anything. She just wanted to forget. He paused, looking back toward his own front door. I think the memory card is still in her desk drawer. My heart hammered against my ribs. A memory card. A tiny square of plastic that could hold the undeniable proof I needed. It felt too good to be true. Do you think... Is there any chance I could see it? I asked, my voice barely a whisper. Dr. Davidson studied my face for a long moment, a silent negotiation passing between us. He was weighing the pain of reopening that wound against the possibility of justice. Finally, he gave a slow, deliberate nod. Wait here. He disappeared inside. The 5 minutes he was gone felt like an eternity. I stood on his doorstep, shifting my weight, my mind racing. What if there was nothing on it? What if he came back and said he couldn't find it? This felt like my only chance to expose the Johnsons for who they really were. When he returned, he was holding a small black camera and a laptop. His wife, Ilara, was with him. Her face was etched with the same weary caution as her husband's, but there was a fire in her eyes that told me she hadn't forgotten a single detail. She didn't say a word, just opened the laptop on a small porch table and inserted the memory card. The video files were labeled by date. She clicked on one from the week they pulled their offer. The video was grainy, shot through a window, but the vantage point was clear. It showed the front lawn of what was now the Johnsons' house and the sidewalk in front of it. We fast-forwarded through hours of footage showing nothing but passing cars and pedestrians. And then we saw it. The timestamp was just after 2 a.m. The street was empty, bathed in the sickly orange of the streetlights. A figure emerged from the house. It was Tom Johnson. He was carrying a watering can, just like in Lily's drawing. He walked calmly to the edge of the lawn, right where the Davidsons' welcome mat had been, and began to pour the contents of the can onto the grass. He moved with a chilling nonchalance, as if he were simply watering his petunias. After emptying the can, he stood there for a moment, looking around before turning and walking back inside, a smug, satisfied look on his face that was visible even in the poor lighting. My breath hitched. Ilara let out a small, pained gasp. It was everything. It was the proof. There's more, Marcus said, his voice grim. He navigated to another file, a short clip from the following afternoon. It showed Tom and Carol standing in their driveway. Carol was holding a piece of paper, the note. She laughed a soundless movement on the video and handed it to Tom, who tucked it into their mailbox, the one meant for the new homeowners. They looked directly at the house, directly at the hidden camera, their faces alight with a kind of triumphant cruelty. "We have them," I whispered, a wave of relief so powerful it almost buckled my knees. The Davidsons let me copy the files onto a flash drive. As I was leaving, Ilara finally spoke. "Thank you," she said, her voice quiet but firm. "Thank you for not looking the other way." I just nodded, too overwhelmed to speak. The drive home was a blur. I clutched the flash drive in my hand like it was a holy relic. I didn't go to the police, not at first. A grainy video and a story of harassment might get filed away. I needed to land a blow they couldn't recover from. The next morning, I made several copies of the video. I sent one to the president of our homeowners association, along with a detailed email explaining the situation and attaching a photo of Lily's drawing. I sent another to the principal of the elementary school that Lily and Chloe attended, expressing my grave concern about the values being taught in the Johnson household. And then I waited. The fallout was swift and spectacular. The HOA, terrified of a lawsuit and accusations of fostering a racist environment, immediately launched an investigation. Within 48 hours, a certified letter was delivered to the Johnsons, informing them they were in violation of multiple bylaws regarding conduct and property damage, citing the poisoned public lawn. The letter, I later found out, included a link to the video evidence. The neighborhood's group chat, usually a placid stream of lost pets and requests for babysitters, exploded. The video went viral among the residents of our quiet little suburb. People were horrified. The perfect couple, the bakers of pies and assemblers of furniture, were suddenly pariahs. The friendly waves stopped. When Carol tried to drop off cookies at a neighbor's house, the door was shut in her face. People crossed the street to avoid them. Their perfect, curated world crumbled around them in less than a week. The school principal called me personally. She had a meeting with Tom and Carol. I don't know what was said, but I know that Chloe was pulled out of school the next day. I felt a pang of sadness for her, a little girl caught in the wreckage of her parents' hate, but I also felt a fierce protective pride for my own daughter, who had unknowingly been the catalyst for all of this. One evening, about 2 weeks later, I was in the kitchen when I saw the flashing lights of a moving truck pull up to the Johnsons' house. They were leaving. Under the cover of darkness, they were packing up their lives and slinking away. I watched as Tom, his face a mask of bitter resentment, loaded box after box. He never once looked toward my house. I walked over to Lily, who was sitting at her little table, drawing. I knelt beside her and looked at her picture. It was our two houses, side by side. On our side she'd drawn me and her, holding hands under a big, smiling sun. The Johnson side of the paper, however, was completely blank. "What are you going to draw there, sweet pea?" I asked gently. She picked up a brown crayon, the same one she'd used for the Davidson family. She thought for a moment, then began to draw. A man, a woman, and a little boy. They were standing in the empty yard next door, and all three of them were smiling. Above their heads, she drew a bright, colorful rainbow, connecting their new house to ours. A few months later, a for sale sign went up, quickly replaced by a sold sign. I was grilling in the backyard when I saw our new neighbors for the first time. It was the Davidsons. Marcus saw me and smiled, a genuine, unguarded smile this time. Their little boy, Leo, ran over to the gate that separated our yards. Lily, who had been watering my tomato plants, dropped her little watering can and ran to meet him. I watched as the two of them began to play, their laughter filling the summer air, a sound of pure, uncomplicated joy. I looked at the patch of grass by the sidewalk. New healthy green shoots were finally pushing their way up through the poisoned soil. The weeds were gone, the flowers were starting to grow,